Like the gospel today, I have just a story to share with you. Sammy Torino was on his third day of his trip. So far, it had been 40 hours of driving, stopping only at rest areas for sleep in between the long hauls. For over 2,500 miles, Sammy had dreamt of fulfilling his life dream, to see the painted lady butterflies in their annual migration from Mexico to Antarctica. This long trip of his seeming romantic when he compared it to the struggles of the butterflies he was headed to see. Ever since Sammy was a little child, he had had this dream to see the painted lady butterflies in the deserts of California, the place that seemed like a fantasy land to him. All the way there for the entire drive, he had flashbacks to when he was a kid and first learned about these amazing creatures. He had learned about them watching the Discovery Channel accidentally as he had been flipping through the channels one Saturday morning in between cartoons. He had learned that in this annual migration, there are 6 or 7 generations that live and die. The butterflies that leave Mexico will never reach Antarctica. It will be their great-great-great-great-grandkids that finally get to the promised land. It's a miracle of science that they even know how to get to go where they're going, back and forth again and again, year after year in this pattern. In Sammy Torino's mind, this was magic. He had never heard of such a thing before. It got stuck up in his head forever, a new way of seeing the world that astounded him. It was a way that brought him new meaning for life itself. And well, this was Sammy's time to finally get to see them. He'd taken a week off of work. That meant 3 days of driving from New York to California. Just 1 day in the Gonzaga Borrego Desert State Park and then straight back again to Brooklyn. He felt like an immigrant butterfly himself. The only difference was that he was doing this for himself, not his kids, let alone his great-great-great-great-grandkids. Now, Sammy hadn't been alone on this trip at all. No, with him, over and over again over the phone, was Sammy's good friend, Jesus. Sammy considered him his spiritual advisor, and so as he drove, he would call Jesus just to talk, to let him know what was going on, to let him know he was safe, to help him process the reasons that he felt he needed this vacation so bad. It was during these conversations so far that Sammy had let Jesus know just how frustrated he was with how the world has been working, and how glad he was to finally get away for a while. As he drove, they talked about the news, religions, and politics. Not too different from a real car ride with a passenger sitting right next to you, just over the phone here. And well, to say the least, Sammy Torino was frustrated. More times than you could count, he'd end a conversation with Jesus saying, "Man, I hate people." Jesus responding with, "I don't think you do." Sammy would smile and say, "Goodbye, my friend. I'll try to let that sink in this time. Talk to you soon." It was during one of these conversations, as Sammy watched his trip odometer roll over 2,700 miles, when Sammy said, "I'm almost here, Jesus. I gotta let you go. There's a sign for the town of Amistad just up ahead. I'm almost there." And so there it was, this little town on the edge of the national park. Amistad, California. Not much there. A gas station, a motel that could have had the name Bates on the sign, and a little emergency medical center with a lime green neon sign that said 24 hours. Sammy was going to visit each one of these 3 buildings. But as for now, he pulled into the gas station to fill up. As he stood there pumping gas, he watched the dust flying up in the desert sunset. No painted lady butterflies so far. He went into the gas station to pay and get some bottled water and ice for the next day. Asking the cashier, he said, "What's up with all that dust over there? It's blocking the sunset. It's hard to breathe. What's going on? Is there a storm coming?" Worried that he might get rained out the next day, his only day in town. "You're not from around here, are you?" said the cashier. His name tag said Randy. "No," is all Sammy could get out. Not quite sure what this had to do with his question. It's the dune buggies up there. It's that time of year again. They're out there all day tearing up the trails in the park. It's a lot of fun. You should rent one if you get a chance. No, that's okay. I'm here for the butterflies. Oh, okay, said the cashier with a smirk on his face. People used to come for that all the time. Not so much lately. Sammy paid, thanked the man, and turned to walk out the door. As he got in his car, checking that the windows were rolled up tight, he said right out loud, "Man, I hate people." Sammy headed straight for the hotel. There was no doubt which one was his. It was the only one in town. He checked in, found his room, and set out his gear for the next day. Cargo shorts, the ones that only guys over 40 wear anymore. A camera with multiple lenses bought just for this trip. Water bottles on ice, granola bars ready to go, all set. And so he went directly to sleep, ready to dream again about those images that had been locked in his head of the desert covered in color that he had dreamt about since he was just a kid. But there were no dreams to recall as he opened his eyes to the alarm clock blaring at him. No need to hit snooze this morning. He jumped up, skipped his shower, got dressed, and was ready to go in no time. He checked out way before the sun was up and was driving into his promised land, the Anza Borrego Desert State Park. He was ready to witness God in all God's glory. It was gorgeous, to say the least, even still in the dark. Windows down, trying to soak up every second of the experience, he fell to the cold desert air on his arm that hung out the window, catching the breeze. He watched a few small birds flying in the earliest morning light on the horizon. No painted lady butterflies yet, though. Maybe a few bats still around hunting the mosquitoes. As he pulled off Old Cane Springs Road, his tires hit the dirt. Looking at the trash, the shot-up water bottles on the road, he was reminded of the dune buggies and their destruction of the sunset the previous evening. He whispered out loud, "Man, I hate people." Sammy's eyes were squinted as he looked for any sign that might lead him to Whale Mountain, a place on his map that showed a 5,320-foot peak above sea level. He figured if he could just get there before the air temp rose, a mile up in the air, he would be able to see the butterfly clouds coming across the valley. A valley he could already see was covered in its annual wildflower bloom. It was then that Sammy saw something unusual. It was a dune buggy parked in the middle of the road. The driver with his helmet and gear on was hunched over a body that wasn't moving. Sammy got closer and pulled over. When the dune buggy driver finally heard the car pulling up behind him, he jumped into his cart and sped off dangerously down the road, veering off into the bushes to the north, away from the mountain where Sammy was headed. Sammy didn't know what to think. Why would this person leave his friend out here like this? And so he jumped out of the car and ran to the person who was still lying there. Was she dead, he wondered? Had he just witnessed a murder? Sammy stood straight up, looked around carefully. He saw the dust rising from the fleeing dune buggy in the distance. This reassured him a little of his own safety, and so he ran to his car to get some water for this woman. He leaned in to see if he could hear any breathing. He put his fingers on her wrist to see if there was a pulse. And when there was, he slowly poured just a little ice water into the side of the mouth of this dark and dirty-skinned woman who was lying there suffering. A grunt was all she gave him. With a little lifting of her head, her eyes didn't open. Immediately, Sammy picked this stranger up, laid her in the back seat of his own car, and turned around to head to the 24-hour medical center back in Amistad. The whole way there, all he did was pray and worry, every once in a while reaching back to touch the woman's arm and offer reassurance that everything was going to be okay, but he wasn't sure if he was lying or not. In less time than he expected, Sammy and this stranger pulled into the parking lot of the med center. At the door under the green neon sign, Sammy pulled the woman out of the car. In his arms, like a man carrying his wife through the threshold, he walked through the automatic door to an empty room with empty chairs. Nobody was there, so he screamed, "Help!" Almost immediately, a woman in a white nurse's hat peeked around the corner. "What's wrong?" she said with a surprised voice. "Oh, it's one of those," she said with her adrenaline coming down almost immediately. "Bring her over here. I'll call the doctor and see what we can do." Sammy laid her down on a gurney. The nurse rolled her in back, saying, "I've got her from now. You can go." The door to the back of the medical rooms closed. Sammy was in shock. What had just happened? Why did the nurse say it was okay for him to leave? Sammy sat down to wait. It was over an hour before the nurse came back into the waiting room. She was a little surprised to see Sammy Torino sitting there. "Oh, you're still here?" "Yes, I'm still here. Why would I leave? I found a person lying almost dead in the desert, and this is the response that we get? Why haven't the police shown up? Why hasn't a helicopter landed to bring her to a real hospital? What the heck is going on here?" "You're not from around here, are you?" the nurse responded. "No, I'm not. And I don't think I really want to be. What is going on here?" "Sir, have a seat. Let me explain it to you. This happens here all the time. That woman you found lying in the desert is an immigrant. They come across the desert here, and by the time they get here, they are in this kind of shape usually. They do it to themselves." Sammy responding, "No, I don't think you understand. I'm pretty sure this woman had been ambushed and robbed. I drove up on the scene earlier this morning. I saw it myself." "No, sir. Yeah, she might have been robbed, but that isn't the reason for her being in such a state. They know what they're in for when they come across the border and through the desert. She was probably robbed a dozen times before you even came upon her. They sign up for it. God knows why. They just keep coming." "I don't understand," Sammy Torino mumbles. "Neither do I. Nobody does. They just keep coming year after year. We help one, and it's like the news gets out, and the next year there are more and more. It's like an infection. All we do is give them some water and send them back out. Where they go from here, God only knows. We'd like to help, but there just aren't any resources. They can't pay for the help they need. That woman you brought in didn't even have an ID on her. No cash, nothing. What are we supposed to do?" "God, I hate people," Sammy says in his head this time. "You know what you can do? You can write her name down as Vecina Mariposa. You can take this credit card and you can cover every one of her expenses that come up. Anything that she needs, I will pay for. Will you help her now?" "Yes, of course," the nurse says, "but that's ridiculous. What happens when we discharge her? She's just going to do it to herself again." "Where's your mercy, lady? I'll tell you what, I'm going next door to the motel and I'm going to reserve a room for her for the next month. When she comes out of your care, send her over there. I can't stay in this town past the day, but I promise that anything that this woman needs, I will pay for. I can't believe that's all it takes." The day went on. Sammy never got to see that woman who he was helping again. Just as he had promised, he went next door and reserved the room. He even went to the gas station and talked with Randy about an account for the immigrant woman who was going to be staying at the hotel. With all of her needs taken care of, and the people in town now willing to help since they were going to be getting something out of it for themselves, Sammy felt a little more comfortable knowing that he had to hit the road once again, and so he did. It was sunset now as Sammy began his 3-day drive back east. And just like his drive there, he decided that it was time to talk to Jesus again. So he pulls his phone from his pocket and makes the call. Jesus answers, and the first thing Sammy says is, "Man, I hate people." You just won't believe what these people act like out here. I've got a story for you that's going to make you shudder. It's a good thing we've got some time to talk. Let me tell you about my day. I drove this whole way here and I didn't even get to see a single butterfly. Jesus listened to every one of Sammy's complaints, like any spiritual advisor should, and he finally said, Sammy, I think those people could learn a lot about those migrating butterflies. The fact that they start their trip and it isn't even for them, but for their great, 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 great grandchildren. Those butterflies have an appreciation for life that goes beyond themselves. Everything they do is for others. From your story, I don't think the people in Amistad get that way of life just yet. You know, it isn't built into people like it is for migrating butterflies. It's something that people all need to learn. Jesus, Sammy says, I just don't understand how they can love the migrating butterflies that built their town and hate another because it migrates. Something so natural for all of God's creatures, just seeking the next place that God is calling them to go, where they can find the food and resources that God wants for them to have. The idea that some lives matter less in this world is the root cause of all that is wrong in this world. I really do hate people. My friend, says Jesus, we are all on pilgrimage. We are all migrants on the earth from generation to generation, just trying to survive. Let's you and I pray for them, that we may all learn to walk in the butterfly's way of resurrection life too. And please don't give up on anybody just yet. For them too, a new generation is coming. I really don't think you hate people, Sammy. Maybe you ought to stop saying that so much. It scares me that you're starting to believe it. Just look what you did today for somebody you don't even know. I really don't think you hate people at all. Sammy smiled, saying, Goodbye, my friend. I'll try and let that sink in this time. Talk to you soon. And he hung up. He knew Jesus was right. Stopping for a moment to let it settle in, he pulled the car over and stood to watch the sunset on the side of the desert road. A single painted lady butterfly twirled across the sky as the sun finally went down on the day. Amen.